Tonight, we drift back to a sleepy corner of old Japan, where a monk gave tea to monkeys, not for mischief, but for science. The sun rises without hurry. Pale golden light pours over temple tiles still wet with last night's rain. The kind of drizzle that lingers like a guest who won't take the hint. You stand under the drooping eaves of a quiet monastery in a sleepy mountain forest, somewhere in 18th century Japan. Though, to be fair, time itself seems to be asleep here. A bell chimes softly, not to announce anything urgent, but as if it's just stretching after a nap. The smell of wet wood, steamed rice, and old paper hangs in the air like a whisper. Welcome to the first day of a life you never asked for, in a temple you've never heard of, observing the thoroughly unremarkable experiments of a monk who thinks boiling leaves and offering them to monkeys counts as rigorous data collection. You probably won't make it through this day, but that's sort of the point. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video if you enjoy learning history slower than moss grows on stone steps. Subscribe if you'd like more tales that value atmosphere over action. And drop your location and the current time in the comments, just so we can all marvel together at how universal sleepiness truly is. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. The stone steps are still damp as you walk up them. They aren't grand or dramatic. They're a little crooked, worn smooth in the center where feet like yours have wandered for generations. The moss on the sides glows a gentle green, as if it has its own private lantern. Birds chirp like they've never heard of urgency. The trees sway in agreement. At the top of the path, the temple waits. Modest, wooden, somehow both ancient and indifferent to time. A thin line of smoke curls from the kitchen roof, the smell of roasted barley teasing your memory. Yes, you've definitely had that tea before, the one that tastes like toasted twigs and respect for tradition. Inside, the monk is already awake. Of course he is. This is Tetsujin, our scientifically inclined yet spiritually distracted protagonist. He is kneeling beside a lacquered tray, carefully arranging 3 small ceramic bowls in a perfect triangle, as if the geometry of triangles itself holds some secret to enlightenment. Or maybe he just likes symmetry. He's wearing dark brown robes, tied a bit too tightly, which explains his persistent squint. Tetsujin is not famous. Not even a little. You won't find his name in textbooks unless they're handwritten by his equally obscure disciples. But he has something no textbook can contain. Unwavering confidence in the importance of offering green tea to macaques and recording the results on fragile rice paper scrolls. You're here to witness this. He glances at you but doesn't smile. His face is serious, earnest to the point of comedy. Like a man trying to convince a frog to take calligraphy lessons. His eyebrows are constantly furrowed, not from anger, but from the weight of his own unnecessary curiosity. Today's experiment. Do monkeys prefer hot tea, lukewarm tea, or tea left out overnight? You do not ask why this matters. Tetsujin begins with a ritual, not a sacred one, a scientific one in his opinion. He bows to the tea kettle, bows to the monkeys who are not present, and bows to you. You're not sure you deserve it. He then pours 3 servings of tea into identical bowls and places them in a line atop a polished log, which serves as his test bench. Historical fact for the evening. During the Edo period, the Japanese government enforced a strict class-based system, but temples like this often became quiet sanctuaries where curious monks could explore botany, brewing, and bad science with little oversight. It was the golden age of taking notes no one would ever read. Weird cultural tidbit. Some monks believed that certain plants had auras that would change depending on who picked them, so Tetsujin insists on harvesting his own tea leaves while humming. Historians still debate whether Tetsujin's monkey experiments were meant as satire or sincere research. Given his 1,200 pages of obsessive notes, we're leaning toward uncomfortably sincere. Outside, a monkey watches through the lattice screen. It's not participating, just judging. His face is unreadable, possibly disappointed. You sip your own tea. It's cooler than it should be, but the flavor is earthy, grounding. You think about how nothing has really happened, and yet you feel deeply immersed. Tetsujin picks up a charcoal brush and begins documenting. Subject: a refuses lukewarm offering. Possible grudge from prior incident. You don't ask what the prior incident was. You settle onto a cushion near the corner. No one expects anything from you today. You're just here to observe the quiet chaos of irrelevant data collection. And maybe, just maybe, to understand why a man would dedicate his life to convincing primates that tea is a pathway to wisdom. The bell rings again. You're not sure if it marks the hour or just the end of Tetsujin's patience. Either way, the tea is still warm. The forest is still swaying. And you are still here. For now. Morning turns into late morning, which feels suspiciously like early morning again. Time in this temple is a circle, possibly shaped like a tea bowl. The clouds roll in gently, like someone pulling soft linen across the sky. Somewhere far off, a bird of indeterminate species is performing its own awkward solo. You are still sitting on the cushion, trying not to fall asleep while watching monkeys judge tea. The monkeys have arrived. 3 of them. One bold, one sleepy, and one suspiciously intelligent looking. Tetsujin has named them A, B, and C, though he also calls them esteemed guests when he thinks they're listening. Subject A is currently holding the warm tea bowl like a scholar pondering existential despair. Subject B has decided to bathe in the overnight tea. Subject C ignores the bowls entirely and instead watches Tetsujin with unnerving intensity. A note is scribbled. Subject B demonstrates disregard for ritual. You shift slightly. The cushion beneath you sighs with ancient dust. Somewhere in the back room, someone is sweeping slowly, rhythmically, like punctuation to this meandering chapter of history. Tetsujin consults his scrolls. They are filled with delicate inkwork, charts of monkey preferences, tiny diagrams of facial expressions, and one hauntingly detailed sketch of a macaque holding a tea whisk with deep concentration. Today, the hypothesis is simple. If offered tea with different levels of steeping, will the monkeys indicate a preference through gesture, sound, or interpretive dance? That last part is not written, but it feels implied. The scribe from the neighboring temple has come by. He is carrying a bamboo pen and a look of restrained confusion. Still studying the monkeys? He asks. Tetsujin nods solemnly. They reveal much. The scribe glances at the monkeys. They reveal fleas. Tetsujin does not laugh. He does not joke. But you catch a twitch at the edge of his lip. That's as close as he gets. Historical fact: the Japanese macaque, also known as the snow monkey, is the northernmost living non-human primate species. They have been known to soak in hot springs, use stones as tools, and, apparently, develop nuanced tea opinions. Weird tidbit: in some Edo-era temples, animals were assigned spiritual ranks and could technically outrank novice monks. It is unclear if the monkeys know this. Historians still debate whether Tetsujin's scrolls influenced any actual science. One Kyoto scholar claimed they inspired a kind of poetic taxonomy. That scholar later admitted he may have been just very tired. You stand to stretch. The floorboards creak. The monkey called Subject C follows your movement with narrowed eyes. For a moment you worry it has memorized your face. Outside, a wind chime jingles faintly. The clouds have settled into a pale gray mood. Rain is promised but not guaranteed. Tetsujin bows again, this time to the monkeys. He serves them a second flight of tea. Now with chrysanthemum, toasted barley, and an experimental blend he's dubbed Mountain Stillness No. 4. Subject A sniffs, turns away. Subject B tries to eat the bowl. Subject C finally drinks. Slowly, thoughtfully, Tetsujin gasps. We are seen. He writes with the energy of a man discovering gravity. You read over his shoulder. Subject C accepts blend No. 4. Reaction. Contemplative pause. Possible understanding of floral notes. Consider repeating trial with altered leaf ratio. You begin to suspect that none of this is about the tea. Maybe it never was. Perhaps it's about attention, patience, the willingness to sit with something pointless long enough to make it sacred. The rain begins, soft as breath. You stay inside, watching ink dry on a scroll that no one will ever publish. And it is enough. Just barely. But enough. You wake from a momentary doze to the sound of rain deepening, like fingers tapping a drum made of soft clay and old wood. The scent of wet stone creeps into the room, and the floor is cool beneath your folded knees. Time has not progressed much. You are still in the temple. The monkeys are still present. And Tetsujin is still taking notes with the desperate energy of a man trying to discover enlightenment in beverage preferences. Subject C now has a small towel draped over its head. No one knows how it got there. Tetsujin interprets this as a sign of introspection. In front of you, a fresh tray of tea has been placed with ceremonial care. Today's blends are steeped to specific lengths. 1 minute, 3 minutes, and until I remembered I left it there. The latter smells like apology and overexposure. Tetsujin narrates as he observes, not to anyone in particular, but perhaps to the spirits of prior monks who might be hovering nearby, wondering why no one is reading sutras. Notice Subject A's aversion to oversteeped bitterness. A metaphor for political excess, perhaps. No one answers. The scribe has not returned today. Maybe he knew better. Subject B has become increasingly uncooperative and is now hiding under the offering table, chewing on a scroll with what can only be described as righteous defiance. You assume that scroll will be labeled lost to analysis. Tetsujin does not scold the monkey. Instead, he adjusts his ink brush and makes a note. Disinterest as data point. Historical fact. In Edo period Japan, formal scientific methods were often entwined with ritual and spiritual observation. Monks like Tetsujin blended disciplines, botany, psychology, and a deep belief in signs from nature. This was not science as the West defined it, but it was thorough, almost aggressively so. Obscure tidbit. Some monks believed tea leaves floated differently depending on the mood of the drinker. There were documented attempts to read fortunes based on leaf angle, with charts that look suspiciously like early star maps. Historians still debate whether Tetsujin's true intent was to prove anything at all, or simply to record the world as he found it, slow, symmetrical, mildly damp. You take a step outside, just under the awning. The rain is polite enough not to blow sideways. Beyond the temple wall, terraced hills vanish into mist, 1,000 shades of green folding into one another like memory. There is a garden path where moss has overachieved. You walk it slowly. Stones sink slightly under your feet, cushioned by centuries of footsteps. A camellia bush leans toward the walkway, blooming despite the season, or maybe because of it. A monk younger than Tetsujin, perhaps 12 years old and possibly named Sora, bows as he passes you with a basket of bean paste buns. He is humming. The tune sounds like it hasn't decided where it wants to go. You wonder if he's part of the experiment or just part of the background. Back in the main room, Subject C is now holding 2 bowls and carefully alternating sips. Tetsujin gasps audibly. You see, he whispers, eyes wide. Choice. You do see. But it's hard to say whether this is science or just really elegant snack time. The day fades without announcement.
No sunset bursts, no dramatic shadows.
Just a soft dimming, as if someone turned down the wick of the world. Tetsujin sighs. We'll repeat it tomorrow, he says. You nod, as though that's a perfectly sane idea. Outside, the rain becomes a hush. Inside, the ink on the scrolls dries with the weight of forgotten ambition. You stay a while longer, unsure of whether you've learned anything and too relaxed to care. Night in the temple is not quiet. It's just deeply polite. The wind rustles the trees like someone reading an old letter out loud. Frogs announce their tiny philosophies. And somewhere nearby, one of the monkeys has learned how to ring the temple bell, which is becoming an issue. You are sleeping in a side room now, wrapped in a cotton futon that smells faintly of cedar and old instruction manuals. The floor creaks as Tetsujin passes by in his nightly rounds. He carries a lantern and a scroll labeled Post-Evening Observations. Unexpected Behaviors. You pretend to sleep. He pretends not to know. Tomorrow's experiment, he mumbles to himself, involves pairing tea with different types of ambient sound. Bamboo flute, temple bells, monkey howls. He wonders aloud if auditory context affects taste perception. You hear the phrase tea acoustics and suppress a snort. Outside, subject B is chasing fireflies. Inside, Tetsujin sits near the dim altar and begins sketching again. Not monkeys this time, but bowls. Dozens of them, all slightly different. Some with cracks. Some with flowers curling up the side. Some plain. Each with a caption. Possible carriers of spiritual resonance. Historical fact. The Edo period saw the refinement of tea as both aesthetic and philosophical practice. Wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and impermanence, became tied to the way tea bowls were shaped, chipped, and used. Tetsujin's obsession with bowls is not unique. It is part of a long tradition of treating everyday objects like sacred texts. Weird cultural tidbit. Some monks believe the way bubbles formed on the surface of whisk tea could predict weather. Tetsujin once tried to correlate bubble patterns with monkey mood swings. That scroll is kept in a locked drawer labeled Preliminary Theories. Historians still debate whether Tetsujin's work belongs in scientific archives, art museums, or novelty cafes. The moon slides between clouds like a cat looking for a warm tile. You get up and walk quietly past the rows of shelves where the scrolls are kept. They lean ever so slightly, as if they too are trying to read one another. You come across one labeled simply, Observation Number 108, Shared Silence Between Observer and Observed. You open it. The page contains no words, just a faint sketch of a monkey and a human sitting side by side, both looking at a tea bowl. The longer you stare at it, the more profound it becomes. Or maybe it's just late. You make your way back to your futon. Tetsujin whispers something to himself in the next room. If a tea leaf falls in a forest and no one records it, does it still brew flavor? You think about answering, but you're already asleep. The rain has stopped. The moss is gleaming. The monkeys are quiet. For now. You wake to the sound of someone sweeping gravel. Not the harsh scrape of hurried chores, but the soft, meditative brushing that says, I've done this every morning for the past 40 years and still haven't found the end of the path. It's still early. The sun is only just pressing its fingers against the rim of the sky, and the temple smells like steam and pine needles. Tetsujin is already awake. Of course he is. He's sitting in the courtyard, his legs tucked beneath him. A scroll on one side and 3 steaming bowls of tea on the other. He is watching the steam rise like a monk watching clouds for omens. You join him quietly, nodding in the universal language of half-awake humans. He gestures to the bowls. This one was stirred clockwise, that one counterclockwise, and this one, with hesitation. You sip the last one. Tastes like existential doubt. Today's experiment involves something Tetsujin calls ceremonial mirroring. Each monkey is given a tiny table and is encouraged to imitate the tea-serving rituals of the monks. You are not sure who came up with this idea, but you suspect Tetsujin had a particularly weird dream. Subject A bows solemnly before serving itself tea. Subject B throws the cup. Subject C impressively folds a napkin. Tetsujin claps softly. Marvelous, he whispers. The young monk Sora is now keeping a log of tea spills. He's developed a rating system based on elegance, intention, and splash radius. Historical fact: the Japanese tea ceremony, shinoyu, developed as both a spiritual and philosophical practice, with meticulous attention to every gesture. From the way the cup is held to the pace of the pour, practitioners believed that through repetition and precision, one could touch the infinite, or at least make fewer messes. Weird cultural tidbit: some tea masters deliberately introduced small imperfections into their rituals. A misplaced step, a slightly cracked cup, to remind themselves that perfection was not the goal. Tetsujin, whether consciously or not, has taken this philosophy to the far edge of reason by introducing monkeys into the equation. Historians still debate whether the scrolls Tetsujin produced were studies in primate behavior or simply long-form poetry disguised as data. You help Sora set out a new tray of sweets, tiny bean confections shaped like plum blossoms. They are meant to accompany the next round of tea tasting, which involves testing flavor perception while holding a pebble in your non-dominant hand. Tetsujin calls it sensory balancing. You call it mildly distracting. Subject B is uninterested in the sweets but deeply invested in the pebbles. Tetsujin, meanwhile, is writing furiously. His latest scroll reads, "Momentary noncompliance as intentional resistance. A cultural reevaluation. A bell rings somewhere deep in the temple. You follow the sound into a new room, one you haven't seen before, lined with shelves of tea canisters, each labeled not by flavor but by mood. Mild pessimism, gentle curiosity, lingering regret. You open one. It smells like roasted barley and unresolved feelings. Tetsujin appears behind you holding 2 cups. This one is for joy, he says, handing you the warmer of the 2. And this one is for whatever today brings. You sip both. They taste the same. He smiles. Then you're ready. Is the afternoon now or close enough? The temple stones are warm beneath your feet, and the cicadas have begun their soft afternoon chorus, like 1,000 clocks all ticking sideways. Tetsujin has relocated the entire experiment to the outer veranda. Environmental shift, he calls it. Controlled variation. Also, the monkeys seem bored. Subject A is now reclining on a cushion, fanning itself with a rice cracker. Subject B is chasing its tail. Subject C is inexplicably wearing a small robe, likely stolen from the laundry line. The robe looks better on it than it did on the abbot. Today's focus: temperature and temperament. Each monkey receives tea at different temperatures: hot, warm, cool, and who let this sit out overnight? You and Sora take turns measuring the reaction time between the first sip and the first visible emotional response. It's not the most scientific method, but Tetsujin insists on documenting every twitch, blink, and sigh. Sora has started naming the different sighs. His favorite is melancholic contentment. Tetsujin, meanwhile, is attempting to create a new scoring system based on eye squint angles. Historical fact: during the Edo period, Japanese scholars often recorded their studies in scrolls that blended data with poetry, illustration, and marginalia. These weren't sterile reports. They were living texts, filled with digressions, sketches of birds, and occasionally frustrated doodles of their own faces. Weird cultural tidbit. One monk in the 18th century believed that yawning during tea tasting was a sign of enlightenment approaching. Another believed it meant the tea was understeeped. They corresponded for 10 years and never agreed. Historians still debate whether Tetsugin's correspondence with other monks was a scientific peer network or just passive-aggressive haiku exchanges. You notice a new scroll on the veranda table, temporal drift and the illusion of sequential brewing. You don't ask. Later, you accompany Tetsujin to the spring near the back of the temple, the water source for all the experiments. It's cool and sweet and surrounded by ferns that seem older than most empires. Tetsujin kneels beside it and fills a ceramic jug. Water, he says, is the only control in this entire mess. You nod. He pauses. Unless the water is watching us back. You don't nod. Back in the main hall, the monkeys are asleep. One holds a teacup in its lap. Another has made a nest out of tasting notes. The third is still wearing the robe. Tetsujin stares at them with the eyes of a man who has just witnessed either chaos or revelation. Tomorrow, he says, we explore silence. You raise an eyebrow. Complete silence. No speaking. Just observation. You ask if that applies to the monkeys. He shrugs. Let's find out. The sky turns gold, then lavender, then the color of cooled ash. The temple bells ring once. You exhale slowly, the scent of roasted tea still on your breath. A wind stirs the papers. The ink remains. The story isn't done. But for now the day is. The day begins in silence. Not the usual peaceful quiet of morning, but the deliberate padded hush of a vow. Tetsujin has declared this observation day. No talking, no note passing, no eyebrow waggling intended to imply sarcasm. Just presence. Just watching. You rise with the sun and follow the sound of soft movement to the main chamber, where the monkeys are already awake and, predictably, not observing the silence at all. Subject A is vocalizing in long, melodic yawns. Subject B is slapping a bamboo cup rhythmically. Subject C is staring at its own reflection in the tea surface and chirping with what may or may not be narcissistic delight. Tetsujin stands in the middle of the room with his eyes closed, arms gently raised, breathing like a rock garden. You sit beside him and try to quiet your mind. Unfortunately, your mind is like Subject B, determined to drum on anything it can find. Sora, already ahead of everyone, has positioned himself behind a shoji screen and is sketching with a stick of charcoal on rice paper. You peer over and see impressions, not drawings, of today's emotional landscape. A drooping branch for boredom, a small spiral for confusion, a single dot, aggressively pressed, for Subject B. Historical fact. Japanese Zen monks often practiced periods of total silence as a method of deepened awareness. These weren't passive silences, they were full of attention. A silence that could hear a kettle warming 3 rooms away. Weird cultural tidbit. In some temples, there were designated silence police, whose only job was to wander the grounds with a wooden clapper and give you a sharp look if you broke the stillness. It's unclear if this was spiritually effective or just deeply awkward. Historians still debate whether the silence was meant to empty the mind or reveal how loud it already was. Today's experiment is passive observation. No tea serving, no interaction. Just sitting near the monkeys while they go about their monkey lives. Tetsujin calls it uninfluenced behavioral baseline. You call it watching monkeys be themselves, which they've been doing all along. Subject A begins arranging pebbles in a line. Subject B takes one look and scatters them. Subject C slowly moves toward the edge of the room, plucks a piece of moss from the wall, and places it in your hand. You look at Tetsujin. He nods solemnly, as though this means something profound. You clutch the moss like a student who's just been handed the secret of the universe. Lunch is a quiet affair. Bowls of barley rice, pickled daikon, and roasted tea are served without ceremony. You eat slowly, savoring the texture of things. Without chatter, each bite feels louder, more layered. The crunch of radish is a small revelation. After lunch, the silence continues into the courtyard. Cicadas carry on their ongoing symphony, completely unbothered by human rules. The monk Ryogen passes by with a tray of used inkstones. He doesn't acknowledge you, but he does glance down at Subject C, who is now sitting cross-legged, mimicking your posture. He smiles slightly, then keeps walking. You begin to suspect the monkeys are observing you more than you're observing them. The day winds down slowly, like a tea kettle that's been left on a stone shelf to cool. As the sun lowers behind the temple roof, Tetsujin raises one hand gently. He opens his eyes and says, "Well, that was informative." Subject A burps. The vow of silence, apparently, ends with digestion. Tonight, it rains. Not a violent storm, just a long, low sigh of a rain that patters against the eaves like fingers drumming a lullaby. The temple feels different in the rain. Softer, like the walls are listening. You find Tetsujin under the covered walkway, watching the raindrops collect on the edge of the tiled roof and fall in near-perfect rhythm. He is holding a ceramic cup, steam rising lazily. "Rain tea," he says without explanation. You sit beside him and he pours you some. It tastes slightly metallic, faintly herbal, and very contemplative. Subject A joins you. It settles beside Tetsujin and tries to mimic his posture. Its expression is solemn. Subject B is missing, but you can hear the historical fact. In early Japanese monastic practice, memory was trained through object association and poetic recall. Monks would hide symbols along walking paths and try to reconstruct stories or teachings based on what they remembered later. Weird cultural tidbit. Some temples used memory gardens, landscapes arranged with symbolic elements to help monks memorize long sutras. Forgetting a stone's meaning was sometimes considered a spiritual message. Historians still debate whether these memory methods improved recall or simply made the act of forgetting more beautiful. Later, by candlelight, you help Sora review the data. His notes include comments like, "Subject B clearly remembered stone cup but pretended not to," and Subject A may be inventing a myth about the driftwood carving. You suggest they may have passed the test. Tetsujin leans back, holding his cup. They've passed something, he says. Outside, the rain softens to a drizzle. You lie down on the tatami, your head filled with images of lanterns, moss, monkeys, and cups. In the distance, you hear Subject C humming. You're not sure if it's real. You don't mind. You sleep anyway. You wake to the soft sound of sweeping. Somewhere, a broom is making long, thoughtful arcs across wooden floors. The kind of sweeping that isn't just about cleaning. More like meditation with bristles. The rain has passed. The air smells like cedar and damp stone. The clouds above the temple are stretched out like rice paper pulled thin, and the light filters through them with all the drama of a no performance about absolutely nothing. You step into the courtyard barefoot. The ground is wet, but not cold. You watch as Subject A balances precariously on a rock, trying to catch falling camellia petals. It's unclear if this is science, performance art, or just boredom. Maybe all three. Tetsujin enters with a large woven basket. He gestures for you to follow him behind the main hall. Today we test scent, he says, pulling out bundles of dried herbs, shiso, yamogi, hinoki bark, and one small, deeply wrinkled plum that has seen too much. You help him lay out the bundles on clean white cloth. He places them in a row like ceremonial offerings. Memory is not just vision, he says. It's the smell of breakfast 3 summers ago, the way firewood crackles, the scent of your teacher's robe when he was annoyed at your footnotes. You nod respectfully, unsure whether that last one was a personal anecdote or a universal truth. The monkeys are brought in one at a time. They sniff each scent, react or don't, and then return to their corners with inscrutable expressions. Subject B sneezes 5 times, dramatically. Subject C licks the hinoki bark. Subject A takes the dried plum and buries it in the sand like a relic. Historical fact: in classical Japanese gardens and temples, certain scents were deliberately cultivated to evoke specific emotions or seasons. Hinoki, for instance, was associated with purity and calm, while plum blossoms hinted at perseverance and the coming of spring. Weird cultural tidbit. In the Edo period, some wealthy nobles held incense-guessing games, kodo, where participants would sniff different blends of incense and try to identify them, like wine tastings for monks. Today, the monkeys receive mail. Not literal mail, of course, but scrolls. Small ones, rolled and tied with twine, delivered in a lacquered box that Tetsujin produces with flair and zero explanation. Let us test symbol recognition, he says, as though this is the obvious next step in T-based primate cognition science. Each scroll contains a brush-drawn symbol: a sun, a wave, a tea leaf, a hand. They're shown to the monkeys, one at a time, alongside a tray of objects. Subject A, after much dramatic hesitation, pairs the sun symbol with a warm rock. Subject B grabs the hand scroll and smacks the tray, which seems like some kind of answer. Subject C carefully matches the tea leaf scroll with, you guessed it, a cup of tea. C, says Tetsujin. eyes wide with the satisfaction of a man who has just invented language all over again. You're less sure, but the confidence is soothing. Subject A keeps its scroll. Tetsujin allows it, noting, attachment is data. Later, in the storage room, you catch Subject B trying to paint its own symbol using a stick and spilled ink. The resulting shape resembles a foot sneezing. You take a photo with your mind. No one will believe you. Historical fact: in early Japanese monasteries, symbolic imagery was often used as a memory aid for meditation. A single image might represent an entire sutra chapter, a concept, or a cautionary tale. Novices were expected to meditate on the image until its meaning revealed itself, or drove them mildly poetic. Weird cultural tidbit. There was once a Buddhist riddle, told entirely through illustrated scrolls, where the solution was, you already knew the answer. Extremely frustrating. Very on-brand. Historians still debate whether symbols were used in training monks in actual comprehension, or simply to drive them into deeper silence through confusion. As the sun dips low and shadows stretch like sleepy cats across the temple floor, you find yourself drawing your own symbol in the dust. It's a teacup, but the tea is a spiral, and the spiral is a monkey's tail, and the monkey is holding a scroll. You're not sure what it means, but you feel calmer having made it. That night, the monks host a moon viewing. They hang small bells on the branches of the courtyard trees. The wind moves through them like a breath. The moon is nearly full, and everyone, monks, monkeys, and you, sits facing it in gentle awe. Subject A falls asleep upright. Subject B climbs to the roof and howls softly, possibly in admiration. Subject C passes you a piece of persimmon, then curls into your lap. You've never felt more quietly understood by something with opposable toes. Tetsujin raises a cup of tea. To symbols, he says. You sip, and for once you don't need to understand anything. You're just here, now, under a glowing moon. By now, your days at the temple have begun to blur into one long, soothing brushstroke. You wake when the light touches your eyelids like a polite knock. Breakfast is hot rice, miso soup, and something pickled that might be a vegetable or a dare. The monks eat in silence. The monkeys, less so. Today begins with an unexpected noise. Clinking. You follow the sound to the study hall, where Tetsujin has laid out a collection of small bronze bells, bowls, and tuning stones. Some are perfectly round. Others are cracked or chipped in dignified ways, like philosophers with backstories. He gestures to the monkeys, who are already seated like very hairy music students. Today, he says, we explore sound recognition and emotional resonance. You think he means music class. What follows is either a concert or the world's calmest percussion test. Each monkey is handed a soft mallet, rubber-tipped, monk-approved. Subject A gently taps a bell and listens. Subject B bonks two bowls together and winces. Subject C places a stone in its mouth and glares at everyone. You sit in a corner, half dozing, lulled by the unpredictable rhythm of ancient science and barely trained primates. Historical fact: Sound and vibration were considered deeply spiritual in many Buddhist traditions. Singing bowls, bells, and chants weren't just for ambience. They were tools for aligning the body with cosmic truth, or at least with the room's acoustics. Weird cultural tidbit. Some medieval Japanese temples held bell tournaments, where different bells were judged by tone. The winner got to announce dawn. The loser got rolled down a hill and melted for spare parts. Allegedly, historians still debate whether these sonic experiments had real neurological insight or were just monks being very serious about vibes. After a while, Tetsujin records how long each monkey engages with each sound. Subject B shows a clear preference for low tones. Subject C taps one bowl repeatedly until everyone leaves the room. Subject S sits still and hums. You didn't know monkeys could hum. Later that evening, you find a tiny crack in one of the bells. Tetsujin sees you notice. Flaws, he says, are what make the sound interesting. He hands you a bowl of sweet bean paste and quietly plays a soft chime. Sounds like the inside of a nap. You almost fall asleep right there. The next morning, you wake to find Subject C meditating. Or maybe napping. It's hard to tell. It's sitting perfectly still atop the roof beam of the eastern hall. Eyes closed, tail curled like punctuation. You stare at it for a long time, wondering if you've learned anything since arriving. Tetsujin appears beside you with a scroll under one arm. Today, he says, we return to language. You follow him into the study hall. There, a low table is stacked with flat wooden tiles, each painted with a single kanji. A few are simple sun, tree, tea. Others are more ambitious, melancholy, conceptual embarrassment, unverified monkey data. You blink. Let's see how they interpret, Tetsujin says. Each monkey is given a tile and asked to select a matching item or gesture. Subject A takes sun and points at the window. Subject B takes tree and bites it. Subject C selects melancholy and walks slowly in a circle for 12 minutes. You're impressed, possibly worried. Historical fact: kanji were adopted in Japan from Chinese script, but developed their own nuances. Monks were often the most literate members of society, using written characters for not just reading but teaching, chanting, and, evidently, simian analysis. Weird cultural tidbit. There's an obscure form of Edo-era poetry made entirely of misunderstood kanji, characters used wrongly but poetically, to evoke confusion or philosophical dizziness. Think typo as haiku. Historians still debate whether monkeys can meaningfully interact with written language, but Tetsujin is undeterred. It's not about literacy, he says. It's about association, emotion, gesture, the echo of meaning. You're not sure if he's talking about the monkeys or about you. Subject B draws a new symbol in the dust with its tail. It looks like the character for hot and rest combined. You decide it means nap. By sunset, the monkeys have rearranged the tiles into something resembling a poem. T/cloud/rock/forget/again. You stare at it for a long time. Feels oddly accurate. Later, as the temple lights are extinguished one by one, you sit in the darkening hall, surrounded by wooden tiles and slow breath. Tetsujin enters with a candle and a whisper. Language, he says, was always an excuse. He blows out the candle. The night accepts the silence. You do too. Morning creeps in with the smell of cedar smoke and wet moss. You sit on the temple veranda, sipping barley tea, watching the fog roll in like a careful thought. Tetsujin joins you with a scroll tucked under his sleeve and a surprisingly playful look in his eyes. Today, he says, we test memory. You blink. His plan, it turns out, involves an obstacle course, a wooden box, 3 bright cloths, and exactly 1 chestnut bun. Subject A is first. The bun is shown, then hidden under the red cloth. The box is closed. A short walk is taken, a bell is rung, someone claps twice, and the monkey is returned to the box. Will it remember where the bun is? Subject A lifts the blue cloth, then the yellow, then the red. Victory. Subject B immediately sits on the box and demands a second bun before beginning. Subject C does everything in reverse, removes the bun on the first try, and then hides it somewhere only it knows. Tetsujin claps in admiration. You're just confused. Historical fact. Memory training wasn't just for monks or monkeys. Samurai, merchants, and poets alike practiced forms of memorization tied to spatial movement, rhythm, and even scent. A skilled tea master might memorize hundreds of ceremony variations, each tied to season, rank, and mood. Weird cultural tidbit. In some remote shrines, priests were known to train crows to recognize objects and bring them back in exchange for offerings. One crow famously retrieved a rice scoop every day for 7 years. No one knows what it wanted with all those scoops. Historians still debate whether the monkeys understood the task or just enjoyed the routine. Tetsujin shrugs. Understanding, he says, is a slippery fruit. You watch Subject C reenact the entire routine again, this time pretending not to know where the bun is, only to dramatically discover it under the yellow cloth. Performance or science? Maybe both. Later, as the day fades, Tetsujin sketches a diagram of the trial in his notebook. It includes a small doodle of Subject C winking. You're beginning to suspect the monkeys are studying you, too. You dream of red cloths, secret buns, and laughter that smells like pine. Rain today. It falls gently at first, just a whisper against the tiled roof. Then steadier, softer. A constant hush that erases the outline of the world. Tetsujin smiles at the sky. Perfect weather for observational meditation. You follow him to a long corridor with open screens. The garden glistens. The monkeys gather, sleepy and dry under overhanging eaves. Today, he says, we do nothing. You blink again. You're getting good at blinking. Doing nothing, as it turns out, involves watching the rain hit the pond, seeing which fish surface, counting the number of drips off the same branch, and noting which monkey sighs first. It's Subject A. Subject B sneezes. Subject C holds out its hands like it's auditioning for a rain-based opera. Historical fact. Japanese monastic traditions often incorporated long periods of stillness. Not just meditation, but active shirkantaza, or just sitting, where the goal was not to reach enlightenment but to let it walk by, unnoticed, like a quiet cat. Weird cultural tidbit. Some monks believed enlightenment could be triggered by sudden sensory details. A falling blossom, the smell of ink, or even the sound of a frog jumping into a puddle. One monk reportedly reached awakening after tripping on a broom. Historians still debate whether these moments of clarity were spiritual breakthroughs or just the result of skipping breakfast. Tetsujin pours you a small cup of warm sake. Rain, he says, is a type of clarity. You sip. The monkeys sip too. From puddles, from their paws, from curiosity. You sit for a long time, not doing anything except being part of this soft, wet, perfect scene. A cherry blossom falls, wrong season, wrong tree, no explanation. You don't move. You don't need to. This is the kind of quiet that doesn't require understanding. Only presence. Only breath. Only the sound of rain on an old roof in a world that doesn't mind if you nap through it. The sky this morning looks like old rice paper. Soft, creased, and slightly yellowed at the edges. You rise earlier than usual, wrapped in a robe that smells faintly of charcoal and persimmon. The monkeys are already up. Subject A practices exaggerated bows in front of its reflection in the pond. Subject B steals your rice ball when you're not looking. Subject C simply watches the sunrise with the patience of a retired poet. Tetsujin arrives in full formal robes. Today, he says, is graduation. From what? You ask. He shrugs. From needing to know. You walk with him through the temple grounds. He shows you trees he once mislabeled, stone lanterns cracked by frost, ink brushes that wore down from poor handling. Each thing, each mistake, has become part of the temple's memory. You pass the courtyard where the tea experiments first began. The memory feels old already. The wooden cup still sits on the same stone step. The monkeys naturally ignore it. Historical fact: in the Edo period, some temples kept scrolls called mokoroku, handwritten inventories of everything from kitchen knives to spiritual revelations. Some scrolls include corrections in red ink that span generations of monks, each one gently disagreeing with the last. Weird cultural tidbit. It was once believed that if a monkey lived near a temple long enough, it would start dreaming of sutras. One monk claimed a monkey corrected his chanting rhythm in a dream. Historians still debate whether that monk was joking, sleep-deprived, or simply blessed with a very musical primate. You stop by a cedar tree and press your hand to its bark. It's warm. Tetsujin bows to you. Well observed, he says. The day passes slowly on purpose. The food is simple. The conversation quieter than usual.
Subject orlop.
Subject B offers you a stone, possibly stolen. Subject C gives you a look that could mean anything or nothing or everything. As the sun sets, the air turns golden and thick like barley syrup. You sit on the same veranda where it all began, watching smoke drift lazily from the kitchen chimney. The sounds of the temple soften into low murmurs, like a stream under moss. Tetsujin joins you, holding an empty scroll. There's nothing more to write, he says. You nod. That feels right. Now it's time to sleep. The world narrows now. The details, once so sharp, so quietly funny, begin to blur at the edges, like ink bleeding through old parchment. You're back on the temple veranda. The wood is warm beneath you, still holding the memory of the day's sun. Far in the garden, the wind moves slowly through the bamboo. It rustles in polite syllables. Nothing urgent, nothing loud. A soft bell chimes once. A monk coughs somewhere. The monkeys, for once, are still. Your breath matches the rhythm of the cicadas. Slow in, slower out. You remember the scent of roasted tea leaves, the taste of miso in the morning, the look on Subject C's face when it discovered fireflies. The sky is turning indigo now, faded velvet draped across the edge of sleep. You are part of this world now, not a visitor, not an observer, just someone who stayed long enough for the silence to know your name. Somewhere beyond the hills, the clouds rearrange themselves into stories you no longer need to understand. A distant owl sings a note that folds into the night. And now you can finally let go. Let go of curiosity. Let go of questions. Let go of the day. There's nothing left to learn tonight. Only the soft rustle of leaves. Only the memory of tea. Only the still, kind hush of a temple that will still be here tomorrow. You close your eyes. The monkeys are dreaming. So are you. Good night.